Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we are looking at House Corbray. Ignore the House Royce behind me, I got mixed up on my pictures. We are looking at House Corbray, who, if you are a show-only person, you may not know about House Corbray because they didn't really appear in the TV show. However, in the books, they're all over the place. They just keep on popping up through history. A really intriguing house. They have a Valyrian steel sword. They have got a lot of, I wouldn't quite say legendary, but very famous members in the history of their house. And they've also got a quite crucial role to play in the Vale storyline that we've got going on right now and will be happening in the Winds of Winter. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. I will, as always, I'll frame this around questions from my patrons, but I will start up with a bit of an overview of the house and who they are. They are, and actually, why don't we put up this little map just while we're here, just so we know where we are. This is quartermaster.info. Always try to give them a shout out. I love it. Wonderful little interactive map of Westeros. House Corbray are an old house. They're not ancient, but they are old, and they are from at the time of the Andal invasion of Westeros. They came in to one of the first waves into the east of Westeros, here into the Vale, and they took on a few of the petty lords and kings in the area of the northeast of the Vale of Arryn, around the fingers. Now you can see the fingers there, just sort of in the top middle, top right, the sort of the things that look like fingers pointing out. Their home is called Heartsholme. Their home castle is called Heartsholme, which is a little bit further in. If you look at almost center of this map, that's where it is. It's set. There's a river that comes down from the mountains, quite an icy river that comes down from the mountains. There's the forest to the north, and just to the sort of southwest, you can see that's where the Eyrie is. So they're in quite a central situation here in the Vale. They're sort of their history, as it were, in terms of the invasion. The first Corbray we know about is this guy called Lyn Corbray. He was the first person. He conquered the Fingers, and he declared himself Lord of the Five Fingers. You may remember when we were looking at House Royce a couple of weeks ago. House Royce gathered around themselves just in the latter days of the invasion of the Vale. The last of the first men houses. They were the last of the first men king in the Vale, and they held out, and they pushed back quite a lot. But finally, in the Battle of the Seven Stars, they lost, and House Corbray, their legend amongst themselves, it was in fact one of theirs, Jaime Corbray, who killed Robar the Second Royce, who was this last king, last First Men king there. So from that moment on, they remained and retained their position as one of the strongest houses, one of the foremost houses in the Vale, below the Arryns, but certainly on a par with other big houses like the Royces, for example. So they're old, and they have got great fame, but they're not particularly rich, because if you have a look there at the sort of the map, we've got their lands. It's not the lush lands. The Vale itself, if you can sort of see that green valley, just sort of goes right through the middle of the Vale. That is incredibly verdant. That's where huge amounts of agriculture takes place. They're not there. They're there next to an icy river with a forest and some mountains. The Fingers are craggy outcrops into the narrow sea. This is not the richest of lands that they have. And we don't really get much history really of them at all for the next few thousand years until we get to the Targaryen reign and rule. And then we start finding them popping up randomly in positions of authority, power, influence, not just in the Vale, but also near the Targaryens as well, near the center of power. So, for example, even right at the very beginning, when Visenya was looking for a master of arms for what was then Prince Maegor, later became Maegor the Cruel, the person that she appointed was a Corbray, Gowan Corbray, because he was supposed to be one of the finest knights, which you would have to be if you were going to be training Maegor. Because Maegor was huge. So immediately we have a Corbray who's recognized for his martial prowess. We get another Carl Corbray, who is very famous just a bit later in that same generation. He was close to Aegon, the person who became known as Aegon the Uncrowned. This is the eldest son of Aenys I, the person who Maegor took the crown from. He had Carl Corbray on his side. And he managed to sort of survive all the way through to be pardoned by Maegor, which was actually quite a rare thing to be pardoned by Maegor, because Maegor was quite cruel. But we then have Carl, who is he stays on through Maegor's reign and into the very early years of Jaehaerys I, the old king, when he was young. There was, if you've read Fire and Blood, you may well remember there was an incident where when he was still young, he wasn't ruling per se. Instead, his mother, Alyssa Velaryon, she was Queen Regent. She was ruling alongside the hand of the king, her husband, who is this Rhaegar Baratheon. And he actually kind of suggested going elsewhere, not giving the throne to Jaehaerys. And the person who forced him to back down was Carl Corbray. He simply drew the family sword and laid it down on the table and just said, yeah, this is happening. The family sword, let's talk about it very briefly now. Lady Forlorn. This is a Valyrian steel sword, and which means that it's been in the family certainly more than 400 years, because 400 years ago was when the Doom of Valyria was. In the 200-300 years or so before that, that's when that sword came in. They did have a family sword before that, which was also called Lady Forlorn, but this new Valyrian steel sword, they kind of replaced that with a better model, as it were, which, as a complete throwaway, does make some people wonder whether this was a practice amongst other noble families. Did they have a sword with a name that they then just replaced with another one? A lot of people ask this about, say, Ice, the House Stark sword. Was there a sword, Ice, which went back hundreds, thousands of years in the past before the Valyrian steel sword Ice came into being? We don't know. That's pure speculation. Anyway, that's what the situation was with Lady Forlorn. And Lady Forlorn is passed down from generation to generation within House Corbray, normally to the eldest son, to the Lord, but not always. Sometimes what they do is the Lord can decide to pass it on to a younger son, say, sort of on loan for a generation, if they've shown that they're particularly good at fighting with it. Which does make you wonder whether this is perhaps part of where their fame has come from. The fact that it's not just the Lord who happens to have a ceremonial sword, it's the best fighter in the family happens to have the sword, which is a great sword. So that's the situation that's sort of passed down. And in the story we have at the moment in A Song of Ice and Fire, we have the same. We'll get to the wise in a moment, but we have the same situation. A younger son has the sword, whereas the older son inherited the title. Flicking forward a little bit to the Dance of the Dragons. Now, I don't know whether we will see this in House of the Dragon. We're still a little bit away from this, but we do get two Corbray brothers, who have quite an important role. It's really after the Dance of the Dragons, right? Really, they arrive. The Arryns arrive a little late to the party, it has to be said. Lady Jane Arryn sends her forces off by boat to land around sort of Duskendale area, just a bit north of King's Landing. But just around the time when, at the very end, spoilers for House of the Dragon, by the way, probably, the spoiler warning here is that book spoilers are fine, show spoilers are not. I don't know what they're going to do on the show, but in the books, what happens is that they arrive pretty much as Aegon II dies. So they then, we get the Stark host, led by Cregan Stark, which comes down, and we have the Hour of the Wolf. What we often talk about, how there is this moment when the Starks were in complete control in King's Landing, which is true, but this was for only a very short period of time. And we often say, well, the person who really sort of changed this around was Black Ally, Alison Blackwood, which again is true, but the Corbrays played an important role, because the Starks, when they came down and they arrived, they were all for carrying on with the war. They left their families in the winter in the north. They were not expecting to head south. They've arrived too late, but they think there are still some people that they should be going to war with. When the Corbrays arrive with a sizable force, this then tilts the balance of power in King's Landing. The noble lords who are there, it's not just the Starks with a massive army and everybody else who's had hugely diminished armies and been broken by 3 years of war. Suddenly we get the Corbrays and the army from the Vale tipping the balance, pushing it. So now Cregan Stark can see he was not going to get a consensus. He was not going to get everybody to fall behind him simply because he had the biggest army in Winterfell at the time. So they played an important role there. But then we have this setup for the regency of Aegon III. Now, the realm was divided at this point, and in order to sort of unite things, they decided, they being the people who were there, decided that they should try and create some kind of balance of power. Some people who used to be on Team Green, some people who used to be on Team Black. Now, Tywin Lannister sort of re-emerged and was made Hand of the King. But he, obviously, the Lannisters, they were Team Green. That needed to be balanced with somebody who was considered to have equal power from who was on Team Black. And so they created the post. It wasn't sort of created out of nothing, but they sort of named somebody as the protector of the realm. The person they named was Lord Lyn Corbray. Now, he doesn't seem to have done a particularly effective job, it has to be said. Tywin Lannister, I've got a question about this, so I'll dig into it in a lot more detail later. Tywin Lannister seems to be much better at playing sort of the political game, and Lyn had just sort of lost personal power, and within a matter of a couple of years, actually, he died of the winter fever. His brother, though, had another different but perhaps equally important role to play. So Corwin was named as a regent. There were a set of 7 regents which were established, again, an attempt to not have power concentrated in one person, but to have power spread out. And House Corbray was seen as being one of the more important and influential houses, and so they decided that they would have Corwin Corbray as one of these regents. So he hung around in King's Landing and was ruling as part of the regents. He was ruling in Aegon III's stead while he was still young, and he also intriguingly married Baela Targaryen. Now, Rhaena Targaryen. I always get those two mixed up. He married Rhaena Targaryen. And the reason being that Baela had gone and married, against everybody's wishes, she'd married Alyn Velaryon. And they decided, the powers that be decided, well, they wanted a bit more control over who her sister was going to be marrying. And so they actually gave her the opportunity, said, well, who would you like to marry out of all these people who were like suitors? And she admitted that she had a bit of a soft spot for Corwin, and so she married him. And so actually the Corbrays married into House Targaryen shortly after the Dance of the Dragons. This sadly was not to last long. There was, and again, I've got a question about this, so I will dig into it in more detail then. But there was a civil war in the Vale of Arryn, and so Corwin headed off to try and calm things down, sort things out, and was shot and killed. So the Corbray Targaryen alliance was quite short-lived. The next time we really hear about them is in the first Blackfire Rebellion. Now, you may remember the Battle of the Redgrass Field. It's mentioned in Dunk and Egg. It's talked about in the World of Ice and Fire. This was the pivotal battle in the first Blackfire Rebellion. Daemon Blackfire was there with Aegor Rivers, and facing him were the forces that led, at least partly, by Bloodraven. Now, the way that this is often told, we get this kind of like the hammer and the anvil tactic, but also we hear about Bloodraven and his raven's teeth, his archers, on the top of a high hill, looking down, raining arrows down onto Daemon Blackfire, and that was how Daemon Blackfire was killed. What people don't often talk about is what happened just before that. Was we get another Corbray happens to be here, being quite heroic. Gwaine Corbray, this is. He, at this point, he was a member of the King's Guard, and just when the sort of the King's forces broke, he led a rally and personally sought out Daemon Blackfire, the Pretender himself, and the two of them fought, and they both fought. This was Valyrian steel sword Blackfire against Valyrian steel sword Lady Forlorn, and they fought for an hour. And the sound is described as being, when the two swords clashed, as being, you know, part singing, part screaming. It was it resounded across the battlefield. This lasted for an hour, and eventually Daemon Blackfire won. His sword, he cut through the helmet of Gwaine Corbray, who fell from his horse. At which point, Daemon Blackfire got off his horse and basically, instead of like forcing home the advantage, paused everything for a while, made sure that his fallen enemy, his body got taken back to the maesters behind the lines to see whether they could save him. And that delay allowed Bloodraven and his archers to get to the top of the cliffs and then fire down. So we're not told huge amounts about that incident, but just on the face of it, this does look a bit like Daemon Blackfire's mercy may well have been the thing that cost him the throne. We'll look forward to seeing whether that gets explored in some future TV show or something. But that certainly seems to be. And so, whereas the history is told as them being Daemon as being like, here's the Blackfire pretender, the rebel, just that one snapshot actually makes him seem like quite an honourable person. And it was all to do with Lyn Corbray. As I say, the Corbrays appear just at the centre of the action, lots of different ways. There's a curious moment some time later, we don't know exactly when, but a couple of generations before the story of A Song of Ice and Fire, where and we don't know the whole details of this, but House Corbray hired sellswords from the Essos for Braavos for reasons unknown. And one of these performed so well that they were granted a title and lands they could settle. Just the very edge of one of the smallest finger, a little, not even a castle, a small tower with just a handful of huts and a village outside. And that was the first Lord Baelish. So 2 generations later, Littlefinger is who he is, this minor lord, because of House Corbray gifting this land to basically a sellsword that they got in from over in Essos. Now, coming to the story that we have here, we've got in The Song of Ice and Fire, we've got 2 brothers. Again, this is a theme that happens a lot with the Corbrays. We have Lyn and Lionel. Lionel's the eldest, and he's now Lord of Heartsholme, and he has no children. He was married, seemingly happily, but there were no children from that marriage, and then his wife died. So through all this time, Lyn is the heir. Now, we don't meet Lionel, but we do meet Lyn a few times. We meet him very briefly when we get when Cat and Tyrion go off in Book 1. When they go up to the Eyrie, he's there. Then we see him again when Littlefinger and Sansa head up to the Eyrie. He's quite an interesting figure. He's seemingly cruel. He's a great swordsman. He has got Lady Forlorn, and he seems to be ambitious. He was, it would appear, trying to win the hand of Lysa Arryn, who'd only just been widowed. He seemed to be trying to win her hand. And he also seemed to be wanting to sort of put himself forward. He actually put himself forward to be fighting when they had the trial by combat for Tyrion. He tried to put himself forward for that, but she said no. So he's an intriguing character. We'll dig into all of the details about what's going on with him and his brother and Littlefinger, because he plays this crucial role when Littlefinger launches his coup, as it were. Once he has killed Lysa Arryn, the Lords Declarant arrive, the some of the most powerful lords in the Vale. They arrive, and they're demanding. Littlefinger, having called himself Lord Protector of the Vale, they're demanding that he release Robert Arryn, Sweet Robin, to them, because they don't want Littlefinger ruling the Vale. And the negotiations get completely sidelined when Lyn Corbray, who's there, suddenly draws his sword and starts threatening Littlefinger. Now, everyone's aghast at this, because this is basically breaking guest right. They have been welcomed in. Littlefinger has welcomed them in. He has no weapons on him at all, and then this guest has pulled a sword on him, and the situation is so socially awkward that all of these demands that they have from Littlefinger, they have to just kind of back down and agree to some kind of negotiated middle position, which was basically giving Littlefinger a year. And we discover later that Lyn Corbray he's a plant. He's working for Littlefinger. So that was a little ploy from Littlefinger to try and buy himself some time. So that's a little bit of a rush through the history of House Corbray. Let's bring me up again. There we go. And let's see what we've got. Anything going on in the chat? So we've got I think I saw a couple of things. So Smurfy's saying huzzah, new stream. Yep, absolutely, great to see you. And I've got Darius Hutchinson saying, is Lady Forlorn a secret Stark Valyrian sword? No, I don't think it's a secret Stark Valyrian sword. I think it's well known. It has got a heart-shaped, I think, ruby in it. It is very distinct as it is, and it is famous within the Vale. It has been within the family, the Corbray family, for hundreds of years. So no, this doesn't belong to anyone. This is definitely theirs. And a question from Rabbi OB saying, finally actually going through the books on Audible, thanks to you. How do you get over things like Peter being pronounced Petire? I love listening to the audiobooks. I have to say, Roy Dotrice, he has a mammoth task in front of him with a huge cast of people, the characters that he has to remember and do different voices for and everything. So I don't envy him that task at all. He's now sadly passed away a few years ago, so they will be getting somebody else to do it for whenever we get the Winds of Winter. But you will find that you either hate that or you grow to kind of enjoy the way that names are different. Brienne is rather than Brienne. He uses certainly some of the accents do change. I've noticed that Tywin Lannister started out with what seemed to be, to my ear at least, a Welsh accent, and then turned into something approximating Winston Churchill by the time we got to book 2 or 3. So it does shift around. As I say, it's a thankless task, I think, reading that book. But you have to just grow to enjoy the foibles, I think is what I'm saying. Maura Lee, hi there, Maura, great to see you, saying just a show of love and support. You are loved and the best. Thank you for all the content and great stories in the well-told tale. Thank you. I hugely appreciate it. That's very generous of you, Maura. And Martin S saying, I think it's kind of fortunate they do not have a prominent Lannister named Lionel. It would have been rather corny pun, in my opinion. Yep, that's Lionel Lannister. Yep, I would have got that. So yeah, we get Corbrays go by that name. So Andrew Biederman saying, greetings, Robert. Who are the most notable members of House Corbray before the current story and why? I tried to, as I was going through my introduction, I was trying to sort of pick them out for you as you went. I mean, I think if you sort of asked your average Westerosi person, then they might sort of name check Corwin, the first Lord Corbray, Gawain. The Battle of the Red Grass Field definitely is quite famous. And then we get Leorwyn and Corwin, those two brothers, just after the Dance of the Dragons, who were in important positions. It's not that they did specifically important things themselves, but they were in important positions at a very crucial time for the Seven Kingdoms. Andrew Kay saying Gawain's heroics are super epic. If not for his heroics, the loyalists were on the verge of being overrun. Yep, that's absolutely true. Riley Jack Thompson saying, "Hey Robert, I'll be honest, I know very little about House Corbray. Do not worry. I think that you're not alone in this. But seeing the thumbnail for this stream, the sigil is intriguing. Just wondering if you have any ideas or explanations." Maura Lee, I know that you were also asking this, and Naberios saying, "I'm curious what the House Sigil about the House Sigil. Do we know the meaning behind the ravens, the hearts, and why there are 3 of each?" So it's 3 ravens, each raven carrying a heart. So black raven, red heart on a white background. We have no explanation from George R. R. Martin, so we don't have anything definitive. The hearts definitely. This is a sort of a theme for the house. Their home castle is Heart's Home, and obviously they have the sort of the red heart in Lady Forlorn. So this is something which is definitely a theme for them. One can speculate, and this, I was wanting to put this to the chat because this is the kind of thing that speculating, I think, is quite fun. I have heard some speculations that maybe it's a more recent one, connected when we get the ravens. Perhaps it's connected to Bloodraven, and because of his what happened on the Battle of the Red Grass Field and Gawain Corbray. Personally, I don't think it's likely that it's that late, because the heart theme, I think, was already there. Heart's Home as a house, the heart shape in Lady Forlorn, they've definitely been there for a while. So I think the hearts are definitely a part of their sort of imagery going back centuries. The ravens, we've not really seen it, Heart's Home, so we don't know whether there is a raven. There are many ravens there at all. It's an intriguing one. So I'd love to, if you've got any thoughts. Carl Karsnak saying hearts are all over the books too. Danny's blue heart is tangentially connected to the same motif. Absolutely. Steve Ash Lerner Turner saying 2 for 1 because of missing last week. Thank you very much. Why shouldn't you? Oh, this is the silly joke of the day. Why shouldn't you pillow fight death? Because of the repercussions. I get that. Nice. And my parents raised me as an only child, which really annoyed my sister. Thank you very much. Hugely appreciated. Martin S. Saying, I am in Granada and Lucia, lovely part of the world. Of the towns and cities I have visited on my trip, it is one of the nicer ones. Unfortunately, my tour of Alhambra was cancelled last minute, so unable to fully visit that. Well, I mean, slight digression, but the Alhambra, I was there a year ago, maybe a bit more, which, for those who don't know, it's in Spain. It's this fantastic sort of castle, sort of it's 3 castles in one, really, on this sort of rocky outcrop, I'm guessing you could say, looking out over the ancient city. seat of ancient Spanish royalty, incredibly beautiful. So yeah, I'm a shame you missed out on that one, but it's a lovely part of the world. Commander Ray saying they have lots of corn, so lots of ravens. Yeah. Perhaps. Kirsty Angel saying etymology on Corbray, heart and cry or shriek. There's a Valyrian steel sword that fits the name, but I can't think of it right now. I mean, maybe Heartsbane is what you're thinking of there. And connected in with this, Maura Lee saying or asking, I'm curious about how Lady Forlorn got its name. This is another mystery we have. So for a house that keeps on popping up through history, Lady Forlorn, it feels like a slightly different name for a sword, because it's sort of like it's almost personifying it rather than the typical ice or Blackfire or something like that. It's almost saying it has a personality. And incidentally, when Lyn Corbray does draw the sword, he does refer to it not as a sword, but almost like a person. When I've drawn her, she has a and I can't remember the exact words, but it basically says she wants a drink of red, which is very much like thinking that this is an actual sword with a character. It's a slightly different feel. There's no hint, I think, that this is differently magical in any way, but the way that it is described and used by House Corbray does come across as being a bit different. Let's go to King of Imps. Can you tell us about House Corbray's ancestral seat and lands? There doesn't seem to be much mentioned, but do we know what their castle looks like? Is it in a strategic location? Are their lands important, giving them some advantage over the other Vale houses? Well, let's try and put this back up. So the if you look at this, the first thing that it has to be said, looking at the Vale, is that there is only one, or there are only two bits of the Vale that are potentially monetarily rich. The first is the actual Vale, the valley itself, that sort of goes through, that is, produces a lot of food. And the other is down by the city of Gulltown, where there's a lot of trade that comes in. You then get strategically important places like the Gates of the Moon, which are basically blocking off land access to the Vale itself. And you get incredibly defendable positions like the Eyrie, which is right up at the top of a mountain. There's no hint that Heartsholme has any of those huge inbuilt advantages. As I say, there's an icy river. It's on an icy river which comes down from the mountains. And there's some forests to the north. There's some mountains to the south. If you head up sort of northeast into the wider lands they hold into the fingers, they are rocky. You can scrape out a living there, but you can't. It's not. Nobody would pretend that this is where you get rich. So none of those things seem to particularly stand out, it has to be said. The only thing that, when you look at it, I think makes it stand out as being different to most of the other houses in the Vale is its proximity to the Eyrie. Now, the Vale is quite a hard place to get around. There's a lot of mountains. A lot of the houses, the sort of the rich, influential houses are, if you look down, so you can see Runestone, which is right at the southeast, Gulltown, House Grafton there. That's again down in the southeast. It actually takes a little while to get across to the Eyrie, whereas there is, as far as we can tell, there's a sort of a pass that allows you to get relatively easily from Heartsholme into the Erie. So I think that the advantage we've got here is there is, well, two advantages. One is access to the sea. It is quite inland, but you can just, there's a river which goes right out to the sea. So you can get in and out easily. But secondly, it's pretty close to the center of power. And whereas other houses, if they're wanting to go to see the Lord, then this would be quite the mission. It would take quite a bit of time to get there. You'll find Lyn Corbray is just sort of like hanging around in the Erie, and this just seems like completely normal. They seem to know about the when you're talking to Miranda Royce, she seems to know pretty much all about the Corbrays. They're local, and so I think that is probably the only that we've not been told it's particularly great castle or anything like that. So it's just the central-ish location. As I say, the thing which is outstanding about House Corbray is not its riches, it's not its particular military strength. It just seems to have individuals who seem to sort of climb to great heights. Right, let's have a look. I think I had a couple of questions while I was talking about that. Cast Ballerina saying, regarding your Maester's master plan video, a Redditor went to the Cushing Library and read the drafts for A Clash of Kings, and seemingly all Maesters kept glass candles and are afraid and upset of their return. Why the change? Okay, I mean, I haven't read the article, so I can't really say. Obviously, a digression away from House Corbray, but George R. R. Martin, he changes things as he writes. That's his writing style. He calls it a gardener writer. That's the way that he describes it. And so early drafts of something are not really indicative of where it's going to end up. So if he initially thought the Maesters, they've all got glass candles, that doesn't mean that that's where you end up. And I think the logic has to go that the Maesters as a whole, they are anti-magic. Only 1 in 100 Maesters even gets the Valyrian Steel link, the Higher Mysteries link, the magic, studying magic link in their chain. Only 1 in 100 gets that, bothers to study it. So this isn't something that they push. So I think that George R. Martin probably just followed through his logic and said, well, yeah, they wouldn't, would they? They wouldn't have that. So them being upset of their return, as in they're working again, yes, of course they would be, because they're working for a world without magic. And if the glass candles start working again, that means something's gone wrong with that. Karl Karsnark, breaking down the meanings of things. Heart is life or living being. Heart of winter, heart's bane, heart trees, etc. Inanimate living objects, not unlike a stone giant or other non-living things. Yep, interesting. Madeline Jill saying, thank you for your insightful analysis and making videos which are so peaceful to listen to. Oh, thank you. I'm reading the A Song of Ice and Fire books because you inspired me to. That always means a lot to me. Thank you. I'm really happy about that, and I hope you're enjoying them. Darius Hutchinson, about House Royce and other First Men Vale houses, what is their relationship like with the mountain clans, considering their First Men heritage? The mountain clans are their own thing, really. So there doesn't appear to be, I mean, we haven't seen it, that doesn't mean that there isn't, but there doesn't appear to be any particular change in attitude from the mountain clans to First Men houses. than to those of Andal heritage. As it happens, House Royce are right away the far side of, about as far in the Vale as you could get away from the Mountains and Moon. So they don't have much day-to-day contact. There are broadly speaking, three ways in or out of the Vale. One is that pass which goes through the Mountains of the Moon to the Gates of the Moon, Bloody Gate, things like that. That's the one that we see people like Tyrion and Cat going along that pass. That's the main overland route. But the other routes are Gulltown, the main port, or smaller random little ports. As I say, one House Corbray can get access to the sea. Ned Stark found a fisherman's village which he could get a boat. This is back at the beginning of Robert's Rebellion. He managed to find a fisherman's village, got a boat that could take him up to White Harbour. So you can sort of get out on other ways. And House Royce, they've got a small harbour of their own, so they don't actually need to come into contact with the mountain clans at all. Rabbi Obi, speculation. The strategic advantage of House Corbray is right there on their sigil, the Ravens. They can operate communications without the Maesters. Oh, interesting. I mean, it's it's interesting. The reason for the Ravens being there, we don't know. Is it to do with communication? I mean, we've not heard that it is, but yeah, I suppose it could be. Lunar Cascade, what are their words and how did they come to choose them? Again, we're not told about that either. So George Martin, as I say, this is the curious thing about this house, is that for a house that, I think Andrew K, you put this in the chat as well, for a house that George R. Martin has clearly decided they are going to have a disproportionately large number of people who have significant roles in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. He doesn't tell us huge amounts about the details of the house. He doesn't tell us their house words. He doesn't tell us any bits of information between when they were founded, pretty much, and the Targaryen invasion. He doesn't tell us much about their home. He doesn't tell us why their sigil is like it is. There's a whole blank area. Does that mean that there's something mysterious and magical that they're hiding? Probably not. Probably they're just like a normal old house. But it does open up that small possibility. Let's go to Rassler. Why do you think, now we're diving into some of these famous members of House Corbray from times past, why do you think Sir Tywin Lannister was able to quickly achieve an unspoken dominance over Leowyn? Was Leowyn the best choice for protector of the realm? Okay, so the situation is the end of the Dance of the Dragons. A decision has been made by, really, it's just whoever was there. There wasn't like a person who was in charge who said, this is happening, that's happening. This was just the people who ended up at the end of the war in King's Landing deciding, okay, this is how we're going to do this going forward. And they decided they needed to balance the power of Tywin Lannister, which probably tells you that they realized that he was quite a clever guy. And so they needed someone on Team Black, which immediately cuts in half all of the possible people. And the role that they came up with was Lord Protector of the Realm. Now, this isn't just a made-up title. This is actually one of the monarchs, one of the king's titles that they are given when they are actually anointed king, made ruler. They're called protector of the realm. But sometimes in Targaryen history, that has sort of been, that bit of the title has been given to somebody else. The classic example here, there was Robar Baratheon, we were talking about a little bit earlier, when Jaehaerys was too young to rule. But the classic example in when we get to the Dance of the Dragons, on both the Greens and the Blacks, there's someone who declares themselves Lord Protector. So Daemon Targaryen declares that that's who he is. That's what he says. And for Team Green, Aemond, after the Battle of Rook's Rest, that's the title that he claims. He doesn't claim the kingship. He claims the Lord Protectorship. So there was some kind of precedent there that you would have this role. And although we don't have a sort of a list of bullet points of exactly what the job description is, basically it means that you're in charge of the defense of the realm, which sounds really big and impressive. But in reality, for a continent that just needs to chill for a while, slowly rebuild, that's not that important a role. Nobody's going to war with anybody else, really. I mean, there are a little bit of scuffles with the Greyjoys, but generally speaking, this is not. We're not going to be getting more civil wars because everyone has had enough of war. So, although it sounds like an impressive job title, actually the amount of power was relatively limited. Then on the other side, you have to balance. So Tywin Lannister was quite a clever guy, and he just as a sort of a few examples of what he did in order to sort of gather little bits of power. He had been, during the Dance of the Dragons, he'd been tortured quite horribly, and so his face was a bit of a mess. And he found that people found that quite off-putting. So what he did was he put this kind of silk cowl over his head so no one could see his face, which makes it look as if he's caring about other people's feelings, but really it just made it even more sinister because you couldn't see, no longer could you see his face. It's this faceless person running the Seven Kingdoms. And then also he claimed that the torture that he'd had affected his memory to the point where he could not remember who was actually Team Green or Team Black. And so he was always having to ask me, could you remind me if it came up, which side were they on? That was a really clever little ploy just to show that he was being non-partisan. He did not need somebody to be balancing him because he was not going to be pro Team Green. He was going to be right down the middle. So slowly over time, the fact that the Hand of the King had the more important jobs to be doing, day-to-day control of stuff, and Tywin Lannister seemed to sort of make a push towards the middle ground, the neutral position that doesn't need balancing. And there's another thing, we probably shouldn't always put too much weight on what Mushroom says, but we do have a rather fun quote from him in Fire and Blood about Leowyn, saying, "He was thick of neck and thick of wit, but never have I known a man to fart so loudly." So that's Mushroom, and this is sort of passed on without too much disagreement in the text of Fire and Blood, which seems to imply that was generally the feeling, was that Leowyn was, he may have been a good and capable person, but he wasn't the cleverest. So, was he a good pick for it? Perhaps not, but it's a matter of who was available. And out of the people who were there in King's Landing at that time, then he's probably as good as anyone. And I think this will become very obvious when we reach that point in House of the Dragon. Once you get to that point, almost everybody's died. Almost everyone's gone. The dragons have almost all gone. You cast your eyes around the Seven Kingdoms. The north is going to be buried in winter for the next 2 to 3 years. They're not going to be paying much attention to what's going on. There are children, literally children, who are the ruling lords and ladies of, I think, 3 of the main houses, Lords Paramount. The Vale of Arryn is just about to descend into vicious civil war. This is not a time when people are actually caring about all of the politics. It was a matter of who was there. Shelley J saying, Mushroom is my favourite source for all important information, as it should be. Darius Hutchinson saying, is House Waynwood a First Men house? I don't think so, but I would have to double check that one. Okay, we're about an hour in, so this is the time to say thank you to the moderators. If you are in the chat, if it's your first time here, by the way, welcome. But if you're in the chat, if you're enjoying it, it's kept a safe and happy place by the best moderators in the world. So if you could just show them a little bit of love in the chat, I would hugely appreciate it. And I also want to take this moment to thank my patrons, because I can't do this without your support. So thank you. I hugely appreciate it. Let's go to a couple of other questions, though. Saying, hello, hope you're well. Can you explain what's going on with the succession crisis in the Vale during the Regency, which we've been hinting at it just now, and how that affected the larger plot? Also, do you expect House of the Dragon to include more of the Vale? For example, Rhaena meeting Lyn Corbray. Well, let's cover the second bit of that. We should get, I don't know whether we will, we should get a sight of the Vale early on in season 2. So Jace Velaryon, the heir, Rhaenyra's eldest, is heading off on a diplomatic mission, basically. He's going to north. So Lucerys goes south down to Shipbreaker Bay to Storm's End to try and get the Baratheons on side. We know how that ends up. But Jace heads north. And he stops off first at the Eyrie. Then he goes to White Harbour. Then he goes to Winterfell. And he gets agreements with all of them that they will be joining on the side of Team Black. They will be supporting Rhaenyra. So it's a very successful mission on Jace's part. Now, are they going to show that? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that for timing reasons, they will leave out White Harbour and the Mandalese. We pretty much had confirmation that they are going to the north. We saw that in the trailer. So Winterfell, presumably. Are they going to show us the Eyrie? Again, if they're tight for time, they might decide, and budget, they might decide not to, and just have Jace say, oh yes, I've just arrived from the Eyrie, where da-da-da-da-da. They could work their way around it quite easily. I would love to see it. I don't know whether we will. Later on, though, are we going to see things like, you say, Rhaena meeting Lyn Corbray? Possibly, though my instinct is, unless they're going to be doing the Regency, which I would dearly love them to do the Regency, but I suspect not. They won't want to introduce too many characters who are only really important for that bit. So what they do with Rhaena and Baela, I think, is slightly up in the air, because we've seen Baela already in the trailer look like she's on doing some fighting on a dragonback, which didn't happen in the book. So they seem to be tweaking things already. But we should get Rhaena and Joffrey going to the Vale. Will they show that? Will they just say, oh, we've sent them off to the Vale for safekeeping? It's possible. But in terms of the succession crisis, now this does link in with the Corbrays, because we get Corwin Corbray gets involved in this. The situation is that the ruler of the Vale at the time of the Dance of the Dragons is Lady Jane Arryn. She inherited when she was very young, 3. And there was a bit of controversy about why she inherited. She was the daughter, and there was a cousin who did not inherit, a male cousin. And there's a obvious kind of link across to what happens here with Rhaenyra, because obviously if Jane Arryn doesn't support Rhaenyra, then she undermines her own case for why she should be allowed to be ruling, whereas this is Arnold Arryn, this cousin, was passed over. So she rules for some time, and Arnold doesn't really give up. He tries again a bit later to try and take the Eyrie from her, and eventually she has enough. She has him arrested and put in one of the sky cells. You remember the sky cells? Tyrion was in one of them, and he was there for a long time, and he apparently goes mad. That's what we're told. He loses his mind, and he's kind of released out into the world. No longer a threat to anyone but himself is the general feeling. But eventually we get Jane Arryn just after, a couple of years after the Dance of the Dragons. Jane Arryn dies. It's just from something like the flu or something. It's not the winter fever, but it's around that time. And on her deathbed, she basically manages to dictate, and this is the same kind of feel as like Robert Baratheon on his deathbed, dictating to Ned Stark about what should happen. She, on her deathbed, says that she wants Joffrey Arryn to be succeeding her, because she didn't marry, she didn't have any children, and so, and in the kind of very kind of prudish way that the Maesters wrote, talked about her close lady friend. So I think we can all guess why she didn't marry or have any children in that culture. But she says that her heir, the person who inherits, should be Joffrey Arryn. Now, Joffrey Arryn was a 4th cousin. Now, he served her well, and so she thinks there. And this is therefore again going past Arnold, who is this guy who by now has gone mad, we're told. But Arnold's case is picked up by his son, a guy called Eldrick, who it seems is quite this charismatic figure, and people look at him and go, yeah, so maybe your father, but then your father could pass it on to you. I could imagine you being the ruler, and you're certainly your first cousin territory rather than 4th cousin territory. Maybe we should go with you. And so he gathered a little bit of a following. And then this other guy called, fantastic name, Isambard Arryn, pops up. He's another distant relative. There were lots of Arryns at the time. He's another distant relative. His claim is not that good, but he's got lots of money, and he starts bribing people, and so he gathers together a small force of people, all supporting him in and around Gulltown. So that's the setup, and eventually the crown has to get involved, because this is descending into a civil war, and the only people who can really intervene. It's, I mean, theoretically the Targaryens, but the Targaryens they're all over the place right now. So who's going to get involved? Well, Corwin. So Corwin leads a group of people into the Vale. He sees an expeditionary force into the Vale. Also, Lord Rowan, I think it is, heads in overland, trying to get through the mountains, but he kind of mistimes it, and there's winter, and they have all sorts of problems. And Lyn Corbray manages to find this Eldrick, the son, and he sort of captures him. He takes him out of the equation, but Arnold has managed to run off, and he's now hiding in Runestone with House Royce. So Corwin heads up there, Lyn Corbray, to the gates, and tries to parley. As part of this, he pulls out Lady Forlorn. An archer on the wall sees this and shoots him and kills him. Now, this suddenly elevates things, because he's, by this point, he is one of the regents, which means that he is acting as king in doing that. So what's just happened is regicide. So, as is slightly frustrating with Fire and Blood, this is where the story ends, because we get to the end of Fire and Blood part 1. We always just talk about it as Fire and Blood, but this is like part 1 of the story. We don't know what happens next. We do know that a couple of years down the line, Joffrey is the Lord. So the person who Jane Arryn wanted to succeed did succeed her. But we don't know the details of exactly how that comes about, because George R. R. Martin stopped writing it. There's like 3 or 4 plot lines in Fire and Blood when he has to draw a line somewhere. There are like 3 or 4 plot lines that are just really frustrating. You don't know what happens next. This is one of them that we go, oh, okay. Well, thankfully, we know the end outcome. We just don't know how we get there. Okay. Rustler saying, greetings, Robert. Did Lyn Corbray, this is if you're thinking back now, we're thinking of the Battle of the Redgrass Field, the first Blackfire Rebellion, Lyn Corbray sort of legendarily fighting for an hour one-on-one against Daemon Blackfire. Did he survive his injuries from the Redgrass Fields, and if so, was he left permanently blind? We're not told. The implication is that he did not die on the battlefield, because that's the whole point, that Daemon Blackfire kind of paused things to make sure that he could get back to the Maesters so that they could try and save him. So it's hard to believe that it wasn't a Valyrian steel sword to the head. Probably quite a grievous wound, one would have thought. My instinct is probably he survived, but we're just not told about him anymore. So I think this is one of those things where we are allowed to sort of make up our own story in that point. Robbie OB saying, off topic, but can we all agree that DC Parlov on Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a take on George R. R. Martin, right? I mean, from everything I've heard, he certainly pulls. Well, I'll leave that one. I do love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I shall leave that one hanging. Andrew K saying, it's safe to say the House of the Dragon is not going with Mushroom's account of Jace's methods to get Jane on side. I think that's probably fair. And if you're wondering what Jace's methods to get Jane Arryn on side are, the general rule of thumb is that with Mushroom's account is the most salacious one that you could imagine. So if you just think that, that probably gives you the answer. Michelle Rimo turning up. Great to see you. Let's go to... So Razzler saying House Corbray were responsible for hiring a Bravosi sellsword that would go on to create House Baelish. Were they also the ones who gifted them the land and lordship? Yes, almost certainly. We're not actually told. Again, it's a bit frustrating. This one is that we're not told the details of this, but we know that House Corbray hired Littlefinger's grandfather. We know that the Corbrays then knighted him, and so the clear implication is that that sort of came with a little bit of land. Now, we don't know exactly what he did, why he was hired, what great service he did, whether they just wanted to get rid of that land. We don't know any of those details, but it is indisputable that the reason why Littlefinger is in Westeros is because of House Corbray. Tim Teleshock saying, "Woohoo! Finally caught you online." Well, great to see you. Welcome. Gina Z or Gina Z saying, "Thank you for covering House Corbray today. You're welcome. Could you explain how the Corbrays fit into Littlefinger's plans for the Vale?" And Ninja Robbo saying, "Do you think Lyn might partake in some foul play to remain Lionel's heir? He seems the type, and not a dissimilar character to Daemon, who was in a similar situation as his younger brother." Okay, so this is intriguing and multi-layered, I think is probably the best way to say it. The George R. R. Martin clearly loves these kind of bits of story where you get somebody who is just doing the thing that they're really good at doing for most of a book in one place. And for example, and what I mean by that is in A Clash of Kings, you get Tyrion, who basically spends the entire book just doing what he was born to do, playing politics, outthinking people, and just doing a really good job as acting Hand of the King. And what we have here is Littlefinger in the Vale, who is just surviving and getting power and holding on to the power. And we see it in a way that we don't in the earlier books, because he's like on the fringes. We don't have a POV for him. He's just sort of like comes in and goes out again, and then you just have to piece together what he's been doing in between. Here, we not only have Sansa as Elaine, who is there witnessing what he's doing, but also he's sort of, in his creepy way, sort of coaching her through it. He's explaining why he's doing stuff. Now, we shouldn't always necessarily take him exactly at his word, but a lot of the time it does seem to make sense. So, how does House Corbray fit into this? Well, Littlefinger's plan is he, at a very high level. I did a whole video on Littlefinger's master plan about a year ago, I think, if you're interested. But so he marries Lysa Arryn. So he's then in a position of power and authority. He is the father-in-law to let's not forget, sweet Robin Arryn is the Lord of the Vale. He's still very young. He doesn't operate as the Lord of the Vale, but he is. And Lysa was acting as regent. Littlefinger came in, married her, and then with her death, he killed her. With her death, he then assumes this title of Lord Protector, and basically he is saying he's the regent now. He is ruling in the place of Robin Arryn. Now, he will know that the Vale Lords won't like that. They will not like Littlefinger is this jumped up small-time petty lord who went to King's Landing, managed to get himself up to a position of power, but they don't. They know what he's like. They don't like him. So he knows they're coming, and they're called the Lord's Declarant. There are 6 of them who arrive, or 7 if you include Lyn Corbray, which we'll talk about in just one moment. And they arrive at the Eyrie to negotiate. First of all, they sort of stay outside and they sort of cut off food supplies and things like that. But eventually they come up and they're there. I say negotiate. They make their demands. Now, what does what happens in that meeting? I mentioned it a bit earlier in the stream, is that at one moment Lyn Corbray, who sort of come along with them, he's not the Lord, but everybody knows that his brother is recently married, and so he's just well, he's not been married by that point, but his brother is not there, but Lyn is. So Lyn comes along with Lady Forlorn, and draws his sword and threatens Littlefinger in such a way that it derails all of these negotiations, and the Lords Declarant have to back down and agree a position where basically they say, okay, you've got a year, and after that we need Robin Arryn. So that's stage one. Is he's paid Lyn Corbray to do that, to disrupt the negotiations so that he gets a year, because he backs himself in a year, he can sort this out. Now, his plans for that year are, well, he has lots of plans for that year, to be honest. Of the 6 Lords Declarant, we have Lady Waynwood, who it turns out was in debt, and he's bought up all of her debt, and that seems to have brought her on side. Also, her ward is Harry Harding, Harry the Heir, who he is now manoeuvring to marry to Sansa. So he's got the Waynwoods on side. The Corbrays appear to already be on his side. They're a bit poor. He seems to be paying Lyn to do his dirty work. Lionel, having lost his first wife, Littlefinger manages to get him together with a wealthy merchant's daughter who pays a large dowry, a huge dowry. So basically, he gets a new, younger wife for Lord Corbray and a huge amount of money. So everyone's happy. Lord Corbray thinks, now I can get myself some heirs, and I've got the money that my family that never really seems to have. He's in Littlefinger's debt. So it becomes, and Sansa even works this out, where about the Lyn Corbray thing. She realizes that he's going around basically pretending to be very against Littlefinger, but in reality is doing that in such an unhelpful way that he's actually pushing people to where Littlefinger wants them to be. So that's the role that Lyn Corbray seems to be playing. There is there's a sort of a subplot here, which is obviously that so Lyn Corbray appears to be a social climber. He is, when we first meet him, he's there trying to court Lysa Arryn. And we see this from Kat's perspective. It's fascinating. She sees that there's a couple of people there when she first arrives who are trying to court her sister. One of them is far too old. And then Corbray, she thinks, but I don't think he likes women. And still he is there seemingly trying to marry her. So that is pure, and that's our first impression of him, is that this is pure political ambition, wishing to rise, not because he likes her in particular or anything along those lines. That's pure political ambition. We also discovered that Lyn Corbray, he enjoys killing people is probably the only thing, the way to say it. He challenges people to duels, and he's very good at it. And he has got Lady Forlorn, let's not forget, a Valyrian steel sword. And there's a bit of, I think I've got another question later about this, so I'll roll this one up into here. There seems to be a bit of bad blood between the two brothers. The backstory is that the Battle of the Trident in Robert's Rebellion, the big battle at the end of Robert's Rebellion where Rhaegar dies, lots of sort of subplots happen in that. One of them is that the old Lord Corbray was there and got really badly injured. And the two brothers were by his side. And the elder, Lionel, took his father and brought his father back to the Maesters to try and save his life. The younger brother, Lyn, picked up Lady Forlorn, the sword, and then went on the attack. And he led a small force which actually got as far as Lewin Martell, a member of the Kingsguard, and he personally killed Lewin Martell. So at the end of the battle, the Lord does die, but he decides he's going to pass on his firstborn as normal. But the sword, having seen what happened in that battle, the sword he gives to Lyn Corbray. Now, this creates a little bit of tension, clearly, between the two of them, because Lionel, although he can obviously see and respect his brother's martial prowess, does feel as if that's his birthright being given to somebody else. Lyn is there wanting, clearly being a social climber and spending all this time as heir, and his brother is now marrying someone much younger who almost certainly will be providing him with children. In fact, when we get as far as the pre-release chapter of The Winds of Winter, then it appears that she's already pregnant. So quick work on their part. Which actually does lead me to an aside. Sorry, this is a big digression, but something to look out for. It's not 100% clear, but there's a possibility that the rich merchant's daughter who gets married off to Lionel Corbray may be the mistress of Harry Harding. The reason why, and this is just sort of throwaway kind of lines, is that we don't really know much about this wife, other than the fact that she is from a rich merchant in Gulltown, the daughter of a rich merchant in Gulltown. And we get a small description. One of the things we hear is that she's tall, and she's I can't remember the exact word they use, but it's something like buxom. That's the description we get. Then Harry Harding, in the pre-release chapter of The Winds of Winter that we get, he's there dancing with Sansa, and Sansa is sort of making small talk with him, and he, in a rather awkward way, starts talking about, he says he's got a 2-year-old love child, sort of a bastard born child, but also he's got another love, and Sansa sort of tries to tease him about this. This seems to be sort of Westerosi flirting in a way. She seems to be sort of tease him about this a little bit, and he describes this other love that he has as the daughter of the richest merchant in Gulltown, and that she's tall and slender. Now, if they're not the same person, then they're quite similar, being the daughter of a very rich merchant in Gulltown who's tall. So it's not one of those ones where you look at and you go, that George R. Martin sometimes does, where the descriptions are exactly the same. The description of what Jack and Hagar's new appearance is, and then the mysterious alchemist who appears down in Old Town, they're exactly the same. There's no going around. But the descriptions are just close here. So that's just something to keep half an eye out for. It might be absolutely nothing. It might be complete George R. R. Martin described two people in a quite similar way. That sometimes these things happen, or it might be very important. If it is true, then what does that mean? Well, it means that potentially the child, Lionel Corbray's new child, is actually Harry Harding's bastard. And if he turns around and acknowledges this, that could create a huge problem in the succession. And that perhaps is something that Lyn might be interested in, because he wants to remain the heir to his brother. So that, as I say, that's just a complete digression. But the short version here is into what are their plans? Well, their plans are that they are actually, both of them at the moment, it would appear, are in Team Littlefinger. He is buying them, basically. And he has used this wedding. It's interesting when we're given a list of the attendee list, and he uses this wedding as a way to start getting some of the other Lords Declarant on side. So they are basically the people who are loyal to him, or loyal as in they've been paid by him, who are slightly above suspicion that he can then use to be drawing people into his web. So that's the idea. Might Lyn partake in some foul play to remain Lionel's heir? Quite possibly he might. Or it might simply be that Littlefinger has said, I will make sure that this is what happens. Quick flick through the chat. Andrew K pointing out the concern with the Corbrays is they seem compromised by their lack of wealth, which Baelish has so much to offer in that respect. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the key thing with House Corbray is that they don't have much money. In fact, that Sansa asks Littlefinger, what's Lyn Corbray's reward going to be for doing this? And Littlefinger says he's a man of very simple tastes: gold, boys, and killing. That's what he says. So is he going to give him some killing opportunities? Yeah, I think we'll probably see that. Cast Ballerina saying, could Lionel's wife being saffron and soiled be why none of the Lords Declarant went to the wedding? Quite possibly. It was noticeable why some of them weren't there. Lady Waynwood was definitely there, but this was marrying in social standing. This is marrying down quite a lot. House Corbray, as we've said, they are a very well established noble family. They're one of the second tier. So top tier is in the Vale is House Arryn. Next tier down, House Corbray are definitely in there. House Royce as well. And this is the lord of that. It's not just like a minor third or fourth son. This is the lord of that family. Is marrying a merchant, a commoner, which is very, very rare. Now, so yeah, it's almost certainly there will be an element of they're clearly just trying to buy their way into the nobility, and people will be looking down on it. Oh, Disputed Lands is there in the chat. Hi, Amanda. Great to see you. Commander Ray saying, House Corbray has always been there during conflicts for the Iron Throne. Do you think, assuming they will, alongside other Vale houses, reach the north and learn the identity of Jon, be one of the houses that supports him for king, even if he doesn't push for it, leading to further conflict as Westeros lines up behind their chosen Targaryen, much like a potential Stark succession crisis that will be about the supporters fighting more than the actual Starks? Yes, so this is sort of pushing us forward a couple of books. So at this point, we get quite speculative. But at a very high level, what I can imagine happening, or certainly Littlefinger's plan at a very high level, is that he's going to, what he tells Sansa his plan is, he's going to marry her to Harry Harding. At the wedding, he's going to reveal her. Ta-da! Look, she's got red hair. She's wearing a Stark cloak. She's Sansa Stark. And then all of the Lords of the Vale will sort of fall into line and say, we will get Winterfell back for you. And then she will go up and reclaim the north. And then he has got through her. He's already the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, and he's the Lord Protector of the Vale, and he's got Sansa here in the north. He's like going to be the most powerful person in the northern half of the Seven Kingdoms. This is Littlefinger's plan, it would appear. And so he's thinking he's going to take the Northern Lords up, the Vale Lords up to the north. And let's not forget that they have been staying out of this war so far. Lots of people they've had armies which have been decimated. Their strength is not what it used to be. The Vale Lords have basically been told that they had to stay out. Lysa Arryn just kept them out of all of the fighting, and so they are fresh and they are at full strength. So they're going to end up north. House Royce, Littlefinger basically says that his plan for dealing with Jon Royce is that he's going to get everybody else, and then Jon Royce is going to be on his own, and he's not powerful on his own to oppose Littlefinger. So Jon Royce, already he got into a big argument with Lysa Arryn because he wanted her to support the Starks in this war. He will definitely be up for this. And the Corbrays probably too. They will go up north. So the question is the timing. And is this going to be at a point where the threat from the others is very real, that they're sort of like there at the wall? Is this a point where Jon is already in Winterfell, say? Has Winterfell fallen and Sansa can just go in? That timing, because of the way George R. Martin writes, it would just be speculation on our part at this moment to say when exactly that might happen, because it will be as he's writing it that he discovers that level of detail. But when Jon's true identity comes to light, will there be people sort of pulling in behind him? Again, this is a matter of timing. If we're then in a matter of dealing with the others, then that's the thing that everybody's going to be caring about. It's not a matter of Targaryen civil war at that point. So one thing that I would be intrigued by is on the TV show they dealt with it. We're not taking it as this is how it's going to end, but I'm talking about the iteration of events. The others was dealt with first, and then we had whoever was left there in King's Landing, sort of the second baddie, which is was Euron and Cersei for them. Then you have what about the dragons, and then you have the other random things that have to be tied up in the end. If it's that kind of iteration in the books, events different, but if it's that kind of iteration and the others do get dealt with, before we have to then go off and deal with other things. At that point, yes, you might find people falling in behind somebody if they want John to be leader. But John's position, I think, will remain clear. I don't think he wants to. I don't think he wants to be king. Mike Hanna. House Corbray play an unexpectedly large role in history and are often close to people in power, not just in the Vale, but the entire Seven Kingdoms. They deal heavily with both Aegon the Uncrowned and Maegor, a part of the coalition that brings order to King's Landing after the dance, and have many family members named to the King's Guard. Why do they hold such respect? They are an ancient but poor house from a very isolated part of Westeros, limiting the wealth and political power they can offer an ally. Why is it then that they are respected so much and appear in important positions throughout history? Well, this is a really interesting question, and I think there is not just one answer to this. I think that there are a lot of different answers. We've touched on a lot of them. I think that their geographical proximity to the center of politics in the Vale, I think, is important. I think the fact that they do have this Valyrian steel sword that is not just a ceremonial thing, but is an active weapon of war, and it's not just passed down to the Lord, regardless of how good they are. It's sometimes given to somebody else in the family if they're a particularly good swordsman, which means that Lady Forlorn is more likely to be involved in active duty. And I think there's a sort of a family culture thing that it's quite hard to sort of encapsulate, but for most of history, family culture for, say, the Starks was, we're ruling the North. We're not worrying about the rest of the Seven Kingdoms or the rest of Westeros. We care about the North. That was the family culture there. You get the family culture of the Hightowers is we're staying in Old Town, but we've got this kind of web of influence through the Maesters and the Faith of the Seven. That's their family culture. So every family has it. And House Corbray, clearly their family culture is that individuals will go out and get involved in what's going on in the wider world. You get them, you see Corbray sort of springing up in King's Landing, see them at tourneys. They don't just stay at home. So I think that kind of house culture feel is important. It's not something that you sort of see described all that much, but some houses stay at home, some houses send people out, some houses get involved in politics, some houses don't. Compared to, say, House Royce, we looked at a couple of weeks ago, they're clearly powerful. They're clearly old as a house and much respected. But you would probably say they tend more to stick to what's going on in the Vale compared to the Corbrays, who tend more to be doing things out in the wider world. Curse Ballerina, does liking boys equal men in general, or I won't actually say the things because I don't want to be demonetized, or is it something more sinister? Well, we don't know. This is described, so Lyn Corbray is described in 3 different ways by different people who seem to know him to certain degrees. Cat, first of all, just says that the rumors were that he didn't like the company of women or something along those lines. And then we get Littlefinger, who makes this reference to boys. And then you get Miranda Royce, who makes a very Miranda Royce joke about a sausage between her, if only she had a sausage between her legs. Now, between those 3 bits of information, that's basically all we have to go on. We have nothing else. I'll just leave it to your imagination what you think. He's not painted as a particularly sympathetic individual, let's put it that way. Brimpy Spingle, fun name, saying, "I imagine it. This is Heart's home, being in a gorgeous place to live with a big forest nearby, a river, mountains up to the west, coast not too far away. Not the nicest coast, but hey, it's there if you like boats." Yeah, I think if I were to just stop and say the scenery is probably amazing. Let's put it that way. It's not. There are some bits of the Vale, particularly when you get Sansa, the Sansa chapter, when she goes to Littlefinger's home, that's described as really not that nice. Whereas when you go to somewhere like the Eyrie, you get the views, the mountains. Some of the Vale seems absolutely fantastic, and yeah, Heart's home seems to be in the absolutely fantastic part of it. As Amanda Disputed Lands is in the chat, I shall give her, I don't know, she might have gone away now, but I shall give her the normal shout out that I do, as well as being a friend of the channel and an awesome human being. Fantastic channel, the Disputed Lands. Do go and check it out. Amanda does deep dives into A Song of Ice and Fire in the kind of topics that you just you think you might understand them, or you've got a theory, but she will just dive deeper than you can imagine. On, for example, the links between Targaryens and dragons. Where does that go? She did some fantastic videos about that, and has recently restarted doing videos, which is excellent for all of us. Haven't seen which one she's done recently, but I would recommend them without even seeing them. Let's go to Catherine Firthis. Hi, Robert. Hope all is well. It is. Thank you. House Corbray is one of those houses that you almost don't notice, but who turns out to be fascinating when you do. I wondered about their complex influence during and after the Dance of the Dragons, which I'm sure you will talk about. I have talked about a bit already. Yep. Why, for example, did Princess Rhaena, daughter of Daemon, choose Lyn Corbray for her husband? Did House Corbray at some point have ambitions to place their own family on the throne by marrying into the Targaryens? Right. So she was asked who she wanted to marry out of all of her suitors. So the powers that be there at the time, the regents, were like, we want to get you married off now, but we'll, if you say a name that we think we can live with, then we'll allow you to marry them. So she admits that she had, and I can't remember the exact words it says in Fire and Blood, a soft spot for Lyn Corbray from when she was in the Vale during the dance, and then after the dance she thinks back and goes, yeah, out of all of these people, he's probably the one I like the most. So that's how that happened. It didn't seem to be a power grab by the Corbrays. He was deemed to be acceptable because, firstly, the Corbrays they're a good and noble house, and secondly, his brother was at the time Lord Protector, so he was even more up in the sort of the more influential places of the world. So this wasn't a House Corbray going on a power grab, as far as we can tell. Already noted that his brother seemed to singularly fail to grab any political power when he was Lord Protector of the Seven Kingdoms. So if it was a very bad one. And during their short marriage, Corwin and Rhaena, they don't. I mean, there's no hint that he's pushing for there to be him to have like a particular title or get onto the throne. There's no suggestion of this at all. Whereas some individual Corbrays, and Lyn is the obvious example here, do seem to have personal ambition, most of them seem to be content with just doing whatever task is put in front of them, whether that's being Lord Protector of the Realm, or I'm a member of the King's Guard and I have to go and fight this pretender to the throne. Whatever it is, they just do their thing. So yes, they're, some of them, heroic, and some of them verging on legendary, but they don't appear to be there for the power, if that makes sense. Martin S in the chat saying, just a brief and slight digression. How similar do you think House Stark of Winterfell is to House Atreides in Dune? It seems to me both are the main protagonist houses in their respective stories. Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I mean, it will be interesting to see what happens with Bran, because you could take that kind of analogy one step further and say, okay, so you have the son of the betrayed and murdered head of the house, who is then believed dead himself, who goes off and suddenly becomes incredibly magical and sort of re-emerges. Are they going to take Bran anywhere near that Paul Atreides route? I don't know. So yes, there are definite echoes. I don't think that it's George R. R. Martin sort of cutting and pasting, but I do think that there are definite echoes between those two kind of stories. Let's go to a question from Ty Farnsworth saying, hey, Robert, what was the purpose and goal of Littlefinger's 4-day visit to the Corbrays around the time of the Lysa/Moondor incident? How influential are they in the ultimate power struggle of the Vale? Well, they are influential. So the Littlefinger does a couple of times check in with the Corbrays. If you look at the some sort of semi-canon routes that Littlefinger took from his home to when he first landed in the Vale, marries Lysa Arryn, to the Vale, he seems to go via Hart's home. And so he checks in there. There's the wedding and another trip. He does seem to be very keen to keep the Corbrays on side. And the reason being, they are the biggest house that can give him some sort of reputational cover. So we saw when we were talking about House Royce how he managed to get Nestor Royce on side quite quickly. But that still leaves the main bit of House Royce plus pretty much all of the other major houses against him. If he has House Corbray on side, then it looks like it's not everyone against him. So are they important? Yes, they are, because they're influential, because they're one of those second-tier houses. People will look to them for a lead. And him going off and talking to them is him working through his plan for how to use them. Username redacted. Why did the Corbrays initially fight against the Arryns? And what was the turning point to make them join the rebellion? Okay, so this is Robert's rebellion we're talking about here. So to start with, we tend to think of Robert's rebellion. We have the North, we have the Riverlands, the Vale with Jon Arryn and the Stormlands under Robert Baratheon against the Targaryens and their allies. But things weren't as easy as you might imagine to get everybody on side. Now, we get Ned who goes up to Winterfell, and we don't hear how hard it is to get everybody lined up behind him, but we certainly hear in the Riverlands that the late Lord Frey, Walder Frey, takes his time. He seems not to be 100% following them. The lead from the Tullys. When we get down to the Stormlands, Robert Baratheon is faced immediately with 3 houses in the Stormlands who oppose him and rally armies. And in the Vale, Jon Arryn is faced with the fact that some of the Vale houses are not on his side. And why is this? Well, it's because every house has these 2 different loyalties. The one is to their liege lord, their lord paramount of their region, and the other is to the king. And when the king and their liege lord are against each other, they've got a decision to make. And so whereas most of the Vale lords came in behind Jon Arryn, some of them didn't. And in particular, Gulltown with House Grafton was against. They came in on the king's side in this. They thought they were supporting the king. And Lyn Corbray was with them. Now, what happened with Gulltown is very strategically important for the Vale, the only major port. And this was where Robert Baratheon wanted to get a boat to get across to the Stormlands. So the first actual real battle of the Robert's Rebellion was the attack on Gulltown, where it's not really mentioned all that much. But Jon Arryn and Robert Baratheon head over to Gulltown, and basically they take that, which allows Robert Baratheon to get his boat back to his home to try and rally his troops, and it allows Jon Arryn to then rally all of his troops. So the turning point was they lost, and then they joined the greater Vale army, which joined up eventually with the Riverlands on the north and what remained of Robert Baratheon's Stormlands army. Okay, so Luna Cascade saying, besides being from an old noble house, were the Corbrays known to be good looking or attractive like the Tyrells were? I mean, not especially. We're not told that they're especially good looking. We're not told that they're ugly, but it's striking. So Lyn Corbray, we have a full description of. I can't remember all of the words that we used, but basically the impression is of a very striking person, not beautiful, but certainly noticeable. Raven's Oaths asking what we know about Lyn and Lionel's relationship. I think I've answered that one already. Ranabir Mitra, salutations Robert and Dan, I hope you're both well. Thank you. Yes, I'd like to take Lady Forlorn as an example and ask about this sudden influx of Valyrian steel swords across the major houses of Westeros. Roughly 400 to 600 years ago, the original Lady Forlorn was replaced by the current Valyrian steel version. How did this happen? Jokingly speaking, was there some major Valyrian carnival or fair where all these houses commissioned swords to be made in exchange for gold or power? I'd love to hear your thoughts on how these swords came to Westeros. Yeah, so we're not told the details. Is the starting point, but I think the thing to understand is that so this is from 400 years ago, is when the Doom of Valyria happened. That's when production of Valyrian steel swords obviously finished. And we're told for the 100, 200 years before that, that's when they were slowly being bought by houses in Westeros. Now, what this means is actually Tyrion estimates that there's maybe 200 Valyrian steel weapons in Westeros, although a lot of them have been lost. So that's about one a year. So we're not talking like a major suddenly everybody's got something, this new major fad. They are very expensive, and houses could only get hold of them if suddenly they came into a lot of money. Then they could maybe look into it. Travel to Old Valyria did happen. We know that the maesters did. Quite a few maesters headed over to Old Valyria to study and then bring back information and knowledge. So we do know that happened. So the most likely thing is simply that when a house had got a reasonable amount of money, they would then sort of make inquiries, send messages over saying, we're looking to have a Valyrian steel sword. And then somebody would say, it'll cost you this amount. And then they would head over with the cash and collect the sword and then go back. It's boring, but I think that's probably what happened. April May saying, where is all the Valyrian steel the Targaryens definitely brought with them? Well, we're not told. With the Valyrian steel, there's not much of it. And even at the height of the Valyrian freehold, this was not a thing that every Valyrian person had a Valyrian steel sword, or they had something made out of Valyrian steel. Valyrian steel, as far as we can tell, we don't know all the secrets because it's lost. This was forged and with magic. And the magic almost certainly took some sort of sacrifice. This was a thing which took a while, and they defended the secrets of how to make it very jealously, and they will have been aware of the advantage it was for this to be something of limited supply. It kept the price up, the fact that there wasn't much of it out there. So I think if you're imagining the Targaryens coming over to Dragonstone with cartloads of Valyrian steel, then I don't think that's like they wouldn't have had cartloads of Valyrian steel. Now, as far as we know, they seem to have had the two main swords. They've got what we know as the cat's paw dagger and some other things. There is House of the Dragon, which I think we can call semi-canon or something along those lines. George R. R. Martin has certainly seen, and if not given the thumbs up to everything in it, then he's certainly not given the thumbs down to things in there. And in there, if you remember, Daemon gave Rhaenyra a Valyrian steel necklace, which implies that there is some around. And the Maesters certainly seem to have a secret supply as well. If they're doling out these Valyrian steel links, even if not many maesters get them, only 1 in 100 get them, there are hundreds of maesters out there, and the maesters have been going for hundreds, thousands of years, so that's a lot of Valyrian steel. So they've got a stash somewhere, but no, I don't think that there is there's cartloads of it hidden away somewhere. Let's go to a question from Warren Blythe saying, I see that House Corbray formed with Corwin declaring himself King of the Five Fingers, which reminds me of a line from Scorsese's 2002 film Gangs of New York, when Bill the Butcher Poole says each of the 5 points is a finger. When I close my hand, it becomes a fist, which reminds me that George R. R. Martin grew up looking across the water at New York from New Jersey. Maybe he was looking at southern Manhattan, where the 5 points are located. But wonder if this played into his world building in some form. Feel like George R. R. Martin's sad story of having to walk past the dock his grandfather built now that he is poor and living in government housing might inform Littlefinger a bit. It's interesting. I mean, I don't think George R. R. Martin has ever explicitly said anything along those lines, but it's a good thing, as you say. It's just a left field wandering question. It's an interesting one, but I don't know. The idea of the person who's come good from humble beginnings, it's not unique to him. I think that's probably the main point. And I'm down to my last one question from my patrons. So now is the time to drop any more questions into the chat. I'll try and pick up as much as I possibly can in there. April May saying, looking at Driftmark, that place was loaded with treasures. It was, but the treasures came from Corlys Velarion's journeys. They were not the richest house in Westeros until Corlys Velaryon went, and we're told he took, I can't remember how many ships it was, but a number of ships over to Ashai and loaded them up with gems and spices and things like that. One of the things is, this is a digression, but one of the things about Ashai under the shadow, is that everything there is dead. Nothing grows. So the everyday things like fresh water, food, have to be brought in, and they have a very high price. And they, compared to things like jewels, their jewels are comparatively a lot cheaper, and you can come with what would be fairly normal goods and go away with incredibly exotic things. And so Corlys Velaryon loaded up these ships. Most of them made it all the way back to Driftmark, and that's how they managed to get Driftmark having so many of these treasures. On a couple of people talking about Gangs of New York. It is a great film. Daniel Day-Lewis, a fantastic performance. I don't know how he didn't win the Oscar for that performance. I've no idea who else was up for an Oscar that year, but I can remember it's one of the few times I actually sort of invested myself in who won an Oscar, because I saw that and I thought, wow, what a performance. One of many from him. Great actor. Mike Hanna saying, I missed the previous live stream. But more about the Vale. I just find it extremely interesting that the Vale is a melting pot of noble First Men houses, mountain clansmen, noble Andal houses, and multiple houses that have repeatedly been married with Targaryens, Valyrians, etc. Corbray, Royce, Arryn. Does this melting pot of cultures have any importance? And do you think the Vale, its people and culture, will have a more starring role in upcoming books? It is quite an interesting mix. I think, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's unique in that when we get to look at Dawn, for example, we'll see quite how many different cultures, ethnicities there are in Dawn. And in the north, it kind of echoes it a bit. Most people are from First Men background, but you also get mountain clansmen. We've got some Andals there in the Mandalese, and we've got people living very different lifestyles on Bear Island, for example. I think that the variance that we get within the Vale is not as it's not unique. But in terms of whether its people and culture will have a more starring role in upcoming books, I think what we're going to see for at least half a book's worth of The Winds of Winter is the ending of this Littlefinger grand plan. So he started out having basically launched his coup. I'm the Lord Protector of the Vale now. He's got the most powerful houses in the Vale coming and opposing him. And what we've seen over the course of the last few Sansa chapters, Elaine chapters, is him unpicking that coalition of people against him. And after this, he's going to be launching the next phase. The how do we get these people up and try and claim the North? So we've got at least half a book more of the culture of the Vale, but then probably we're not going to go back to the Vale again. I wouldn't have thought in the rest of the story. The rest of the story feels like it's more focused in on places like Winterfell, maybe the Isle of Faces, down to King's Landing, places like that. Andrew K asking if previous Corbrays have been this quite transactional, money chasing as this current generation. Not that we have seen. There's, I mean, no. We're told a few times that it's not a rich house, but we're not told in particular that any of these characters back from the history that we've been talking about have been motivated by money in particular. In fact, they don't. None of them seem to that doesn't really quite fit with any of them. They seem to be more with duty, if anything else. Username redacted. The Snakewood Forest is not far from Hart's home. Is this name to be taken literal? Could Westerosi snakes make it up to the Eyrie? I don't know. So we don't know much about the Snakewood Forest. We've not been there. My guess is yes. I have to admit I've not looked into it at all. So I don't know. But could Westerosi snakes climb up to the Eyrie? No. It's a nice thought, but if you remember the very last bit, you get these 3 way castles on the way up to the Eyrie, and at the last one you basically get a choice. It's just then completely steep. You either have to go up a ladder that you can only get access to if somebody lets you into it, or they've got like this basket effectively, which is on a winch, which just gets winched up, and so yeah, snakes wouldn't easily be able to get in that way. Charis Ballerina. Sansa questions if Lyn really is pretending to hate Littlefinger, or if he's only pretending to pretend. Could he resent Littlefinger for being above him when his house was above his? When his house was above his, could he harm Sansa or SW as revenge? I'm not sure what SW is. I'm sure someone in the chat will tell me that. So we get Miranda Royce and Sansa go wandering around, and they see Lyn Corbray there. He's dueling with, so it's a sort of practice, but he's dueling with somebody, and he just gives them this almighty clout around the head. If they hadn't been using dueling swords, Sansa thinks that would have been a really, really bad injury. Anyway, they have a little bit of a chat. It's actually framed. Sansa frames it almost like a duel. She talks about her thrust or her parry or something along those lines, so as a part of this, she just puts the information to him that his brother's wife is now pregnant. This is the wedding that Littlefinger arranged, and he reacts badly to this, and it makes her. She'd been under the impression that he was there being paid by Littlefinger to do what Littlefinger wanted. But now she's there thinking, well, hang on a moment. Littlefinger has arranged for his brother to remarry and to have a child, and that's going to push him down the line of succession. Is Lyn actually really angry with Littlefinger? And is he just pretending to hate? So he's being paid by Littlefinger to go around and look like he hates Littlefinger, but does he actually secretly hate Littlefinger? It's possible either way, to be honest. We haven't been told this, but if he has been paid to look like he's going to he hates Littlefinger, Miranda Royce was there as well. He was doing it to an audience, so this all kind of fits. And as I say, I think that there's a chance, whether or not we go down. I went down a slight tangent of possibility with Harry Harding's mistress, but whether that's the case or whether it's something else completely different, it's entirely possible. We're waiting for this killing that Littlefinger seems to have been promising Lyn Corbray. I doubt that Lyn Corbray actually actively likes Littlefinger, but he is being paid to do something that he's happy to do anyway. I think that's probably the way I would see it. Julian, no question, just a small token of appreciation for your work. Well, thank you. That's very generous of you. You have immensely deepened my understanding and enjoyment of this world. Keep up the great work. Also, any chance of a redo for the live streams with bad audio? Going back over the same topics? Probably not for a little while. In terms of the audio, I haven't seen anyone complaining today, which I'm assuming means that it's not too bad. Over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks, I am massively upgrading all of my stuff, getting an expert in to sort things out. So hopefully that should be all better again soon. If an audio expert can tell me a way of actively cleaning up the audio on the ones that it's disrupted, then I'll very happily go and do that. But I think doing a live stream on the same topic again, twice in just a few weeks, probably not. But thank you. That's very generous of you. Reflective rambling, picking up for Brimpy Spingle. Thank you very much. I love it when people pick up things for other people. Thank you, Reflective Rambling. Off topic, but it's been on my mind. Why didn't Tywin ask to have Jaime removed from the Kingsguard right after the rebellion? It's an interesting question. Why didn't he ask for Jaime to be removed from the Kingsguard right after the rebellion? I think at that stage, you have to remember Jaime probably didn't particularly want to be removed from the Kingsguard because he wanted to be near Cersei. So he was happy with that. He didn't particularly want to go off, and if he'd been married to Lysa Arryn or something, then he'd have been hundreds of miles away from Cersei and you'd never see her again. And he did not want that, and Cersei did not want that. And Cersei is the person who had the influence over Robert Baratheon, not Tywin. So I think that's probably the answer. At a more sort of personal political level, although we look back now and say, yes, Tywin had all of this power, he actually didn't to a great extent initially. If you remember, what had happened was that you get Robert's rebellion, and from Robert Baratheon's perspective, he basically, together with Ned and Jon Arryn, they decide, right, that's it, we're going to be opposing the Targaryens. Everybody knows this is the case. He goes off, he fights 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 battles one after the other. He takes serious wounds himself. Friends die. This is massive. This is a fight for their life. They know if they lose, then they will die, and all of the people they care about will be killed. What happens during all of this time? Tywin Lannister does nothing. And then, after the Battle of the Trident, he starts to move his army towards King's Landing. And Robert Baratheon had been injured there. He sends Ned Stark. He says, you have to go get an army, go quick. You have to try and beat Tywin Lannister there, because they thought that Tywin Lannister, there was a good chance he was about to come in on the side of the Targaryens. That's what they thought. That's why Ned Stark was rushing down to King's Landing. And when the Tywin ordered the killing of the Targaryen children and then laid them out in front of Robert Baratheon, that was effectively him trying to prove that he was on his side. Try to get rid of any lingering doubts that maybe he might have been over on secretly on the Targaryen side, because he arrived just in time. He could have just realized the writing. He could have changed his mind at the last minute. He wasn't really in an immediate position to be demanding any or many of these kind of extra things to be thrown to him. He'd already got the wedding of his daughter to Robert Baratheon, and then he headed off far away. Robert Baratheon to Castle Rock. Robert Baratheon did not really care about the running of the kingdom or what happened in a huge amount of these things, but he got his person in, Jon Arryn, to be the hand of the king, rather than getting Tywin. And once he pushed Tywin away, that was then Jon Arryn was then running the show, basically. Let's go to Chaos Ballerina saying Cor is part of Corvus, aka ravens, and also the Latin word for heart. That could help explain the sigil. No idea why there's three. Yeah, sorry, I meant to say that earlier. That's really interesting. So, yes, so ravens, corvids, core. It that works, and it's also, as you say, it's the Latin word for heart. It's the three that get. Maybe it's just a random number. Sometimes we do kind of overthink these things. And George R. R. Martin may simply have been a matter of, okay, what do we have? Well, a heart seems to be their theme, so we'll have some hearts there, not just hearts. They want to be, what kind of imagery? Oh, let's have ravens. How many? 3. It could be as simple as that. But yeah, maybe there's an extra layer of thinking here. Curse Ballerinas, oh, you meant SR for Sweet Robin. No, not your bad at all. Could Lyn kill Sweet Robin for revenge? I mean, I think he will kill anyone that he's got the chance to kill. He seems to actively enjoy it. Reflective Rambling, picking up from Ebenezer Germer. Ebenezer Germer, thank you very much. Will Lady Forlorn be involved in the action against the others? I highly doubt Lyn Corbray is the kind of man to volunteer. He may well head north in order to be part of what's going on when all of the Vale Lords head north. So he may get caught up in what's happening, but yeah, he doesn't come across as being the kind of man to sort of actively volunteer. Maybe he'll stay behind in the Vale. Martin S. They made this is a Lord of the Rings question. They made Glorfindel pathetically weak in Magical Tales of Middle-earth set. 3-2 are clearly too low. This is the Magic the Gathering. They did a Lord of the Rings one. I think you're talking about 3-2, clearly too low combat numbers for Glorfindel. Aragorn is a 5-5. I don't play that game or set, fortunately. No, I would agree with you. That does seem very... I don't know what the card presumably had some special ability with it as well. But yes, you would have to say Glorfindel should not be outclassed by Aragorn, as amazing as Aragorn is. Andrew K saying congratulations on 700k subs on the main channel. I know you don't dwell on the numbers, but a rare and impressive achievement. Thank you very much. Yes, I hit 700,000 on the main channel, 10,000 on this channel as well, just in the last week or so, which is nice. And also other good news from the Lord of the Rings side of the house. We were nominated here for Tolkien Society Awards for the best online content for the year, amongst some other excellent purveyors of online content. So I'm very honoured to be on that list. But yeah, 700,000, it feels good. And also 10,000 on this channel in particular, because we started obviously from scratch on this one, and we're working our way up. Right, let's have a quick flick through the chat. April May saying, remember, Eris wasn't worried about Robert until it was way too late. The war. So Carl Karsnark, as is only right on this channel, bringing everything around to Bloodraven. Corvid, Heartraven, Bloodraven. Absolutely. Right, I think that's... Oh, and Duncan Egg casting, Andrew K saying, what are my thoughts on the Duncan Egg casting? If you missed it, I don't have the picture here in front of me. They have cast the two lead actors for Dunk and Egg, whose names escape me at the moment, but I'm sure we'll all know their names very well. I think they look the part. Neither of them are well-known established actors. I think they've both been in things before, but not as leads. So this was done, I'm sure, on looks and also the audition. And from looks, yes, but they both look the part. The guy who's playing Dunk in particular, the shot they took of him had some quality about his eyes, which seems to have that kind of innocence of Dunk, which I think is an essential part of his character. So yeah, I'm feeling quite positive about it. We will get George Martin. He has done a blog post on this. He said there will be more casting news coming soon. This will be just for season 1, which is the Hedge Knight book 1. So don't expect Bloodraven yet, which that's the exciting one. But we can expect a whole host of Targaryens. Yeah, so I think I'm just trying to think who I'm most intrigued in terms of the other bits of casting for that. I think it probably is the other Targaryens that we're going to be seeing. Deer and the Drunkard be good. Carl Karsnark saying the Dunk actor was a rugby player, which is perfect too. Yeah, he's got a rugby player's physique. I think he's 6'5" from what I hear, which is nearly 2 meters tall, I think. If not, maybe exactly 2 meters tall, something along those lines, which is just a little bit short of what Dunk is in the book, but certainly still quite imposingly tall. Martin S saying, congratulations. That sounds like an awesome Tolkien content nomination. Thank you. I appreciate it. Lots of people saying thank you. Thank you very much to everyone who's saying congratulations. And Ebenezer Germer asking if I've got plans to stream with other creators. I'm tending not to these days. I might do. I mean, I do my occasional book reviews with Aziz. When we get to the TV shows, I may well do streams with. I think I did last time. Actually, I think I got rolled out a few of the greatest hits of having. Some other great content creators along just to sort of do the pre-show live streams. So maybe I'll do that one again. Okay. And I think with that, I will start drawing this one to a close. Okay. So things to look out for, though. We have got next week. I think we've not done House Arryn yet. So we should probably do House Arryn while we're in the Vale. So let's do House Arryn next week. I've got what videos? I always forget what videos I've got coming out. No, it evades me. I might be redoing an Old Nan one. Hang on, let me. Bear with me. I will tell you what my what video I've got coming out. I think I've redone the Old Nan one that I did years ago, and then I will. We've got where are Ned Stark's bones is one I've got coming out, which I think is either coming out tomorrow or next week. So those are a couple of things to be looking forward to. Okay, and if you are watching this back a little later, then appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to lots of other live streams for you to watch. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, moderators. Fantastic job, as always. Thank you, patrons. Take care, everyone. I shall see you next week.